so this isn't my story exactly. It's my dad's, but I've heard him tell it so many times over the years, and every single time he tells it he gets this look on his face, this quiet, faraway look like he's back there again, and I've never once heard him change a single detail, not one. You know how when people tell stories over and over again, little things shift? The fish gets bigger, the timeline gets fuzzy, details get added for effect. My dad's version of the story has never changed in 30 years. Not the exit number, not the weather, not what the guy was wearing. That's the part that gets me more than anything else, that consistency, because my dad is not a dramatic guy. He's not a storyteller by nature. He's a quiet, practical, no-nonsense kind of man who spent 30 years working maintenance for the county and believes in things he can fix with his hands. For him to tell this story at all means something. For him to never embellish it means even more. He told it to me for the first time when I was maybe 12. We were driving home from my grandparents' place late at night, me in the back seat, half asleep, and we passed a guy walking on the shoulder of the highway, and my dad slowed down and looked and then kept going, and I asked him why he didn't stop and give the guy a ride. And instead of answering the question directly, my dad was quiet for a second, and then he said, "Let me tell you about the last time I picked someone up on the side of the road." And he told me the story, just like that. Calm, even-voiced, staring at the road ahead of him. It was 1987. My dad was 24 years old. He'd grown up in a small town about 40 miles south of where we live now, and he'd just taken a job in the city and was driving back home on a Friday night to see his parents for the weekend. This was before cell phones, before GPS, before any of that. Just a guy in a beat-up Chevy pickup on a 2-lane state highway, radio going, windows cracked because it was late summer and the nights were still warm. He said the time was somewhere around 11:30, maybe closer to midnight. He'd been on the road for about an hour. The highway was empty. This wasn't an interstate, just a regular state road through farmland and small towns. And on a Friday night, at that hour, there was almost nobody out there. Flat land on both sides, corn just past its peak. The kind of sky you only get away from the city, where you can actually see the stars doing their thing. He came around a long, gentle curve, and his headlights swept across a figure on the right shoulder. A man, standing still, not walking, just standing there, facing the road. My dad said his first thought was that the guy's car had broken down somewhere and he was looking for help. He slowed down and pulled over. He said the man walked up to the passenger window and my dad rolled it down. The man was maybe mid-40s, my dad thought. Regular looking, not dirty, not disheveled, not the kind of guy that would make you nervous. He was wearing dark slacks and a light-colored button-down shirt, tucked in. My dad said he remembers thinking it was a strange thing to be wearing, to be walking on a highway at midnight, like the guy had been at a dinner or a work event or something. He had dark hair, short and neat, and he was calm. Not relieved to see a car stop, not desperate, just calm, polite. He asked if my dad could give him a ride. My dad asked him where he was headed, and the man said a town name. Millerton, my dad says, which is a small town about 15 miles further up the road. My dad said, "Sure, get in." The man got in the back seat. My dad always specifies this, the back seat, not the front. He didn't ask to sit up front, and my dad didn't invite him. He just opened the back door and got in and closed it, and my dad pulled back onto the highway. They talked a little bit at first. My dad asked if his car had broken down, and the man said no, just needed a ride. My dad asked where he was coming from, and the man gave the name of a town back in the direction my dad had come from. Said he'd been visiting family. My dad asked his name, and the man said it was Robert. Just Robert, no last name offered. My dad said, "Robert, good to meet you, I'm Gary." And then they didn't talk much after that. My dad had the radio on low. He said it wasn't an uncomfortable silence, just a quiet one. The kind of quiet you get in a car late at night when everyone's a little tired. He'd glance in the rearview mirror every once in a while, the way you do when you got someone in your back seat, just checking in. And Robert was always there, sitting straight, looking out the window at the dark fields going by. My dad says he was maybe 5-6 miles from Millerton when he noticed the temperature in the car changed. This is the detail that I always come back to. Not that the radio went out, not that the car made a weird noise, the temperature. He said it got cold, fast, not like the AC kicking on, just cold. The kind of cold that doesn't make sense for a late August night with the windows cracked. He said it raised the hair on his arms and the back of his neck, the way cold does when it hits you suddenly. He looked in the rear-view mirror. The back seat was empty now. My dad is a careful man. He does not jump to conclusions. He told me that his first response was to look at the road, make sure he wasn't about to drive off it, and then to look at the mirror again. Still empty. He looked over his shoulder. Empty. The back door, he checked, because this was his first thought. The back door was closed. Both back doors were closed. The windows were only cracked a couple inches, nowhere near enough for a grown man to climb through at highway speed. He pulled over, got out of the truck, walked all the way around it, checked the bed of the truck in case, and he laughs a little, telling this part, a short, dry laugh, in case the guy had somehow ended up back there, which makes no sense, but you check. You check because your brain is trying to find any explanation. The truck bed was empty, the cab was empty, the road behind him was empty as far as his headlights reached. There was nobody there. He stood on the shoulder of that highway in the warm August night, and there was nobody there. He got back in the truck and he drove to Millerton, and he pulled into a gas station there that was still open. Back then, some of them ran all night, and he sat in the parking lot for a few minutes before he went in. He said he needed to just sit for a minute, gather himself. He went inside, and the guy behind the counter was young, high school age probably, reading a magazine. My dad said he almost didn't ask, but he couldn't help it. He told the kid he'd picked up a hitchhiker on the highway about 6 miles south, a man named Robert heading to Millerton, and that the man had disappeared from his back seat while the truck was moving. He didn't say it like he expected to be believed. He said he just had to tell somebody. The kid behind the counter put his magazine down and looked at my dad for a second, and my dad said, and this is where the story always changes its atmosphere, where you can feel the air in the room shift when he gets to this part. The kid said, "What did he look like?" And my dad described him. Mid-40s, dark hair, dark slacks, light button-down shirt, calm, said his name was Robert. And the kid nodded slowly like he'd heard this before. My dad asked him what that meant. That nod, and the kid looked uncomfortable for a second, like he wasn't sure how much to say, and then he went in the back and came out with an older man, the manager or the owner, someone with some authority to him. And my dad repeated the story to this man, and the man listened all the way through without interrupting, and when my dad was done, the man said, "You picked him up right around where the old grain elevator used to be, didn't you? Around mile marker 41. My dad didn't know the mile markers, but he said it sounded right. The general area sounded right. The older man nodded. He said, "You're not the first person to give that man a ride." He didn't say a lot more than that. My dad pushed a little, asked who the man was, what had happened to him, and the older man said there had been an accident on that stretch of highway a long time ago. A man had died there. He didn't say the name. My dad always says he wishes he'd pushed harder for more details, but he was 24 and shaken, and at some point you just reach your capacity for information and you stop asking. He drove the rest of the way to his parents' house. Got there after 1 in the morning. His mother was up. She always waited up, he says, until all her kids were home, and she could tell something had happened just by looking at him. He told her the whole story over a cup of coffee at her kitchen table, and she listened without saying much. And when he was done, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "You gave him a ride, Gary, and that was a good thing. Maybe that's all he needed." My dad still doesn't know if he believes in ghosts. I've asked him directly, and he always gives the same answer, which is, "I don't know what I believe, but I know what happened." He's not a man who needs it to fit into a category. He just holds it. This thing that happened to him when he was 24 years old on a 2-lane highway in August, and he tells it straight because there's no other way to tell it. I've done some digging over the years, not in a deep investigative way, just the kind of idle Googling you do when a story won't leave you alone. There are a lot of accounts of phantom hitchhikers, Mike, a lot. It's one of the most widespread and consistent paranormal stories across basically every culture on Earth. The details vary. Sometimes the hitchhiker gives a specific address, sometimes they leave something behind in the car, sometimes they warn the driver about something, but the core is always the same. Person appears on the side of the road, accepts a ride, vanishes before reaching the destination. Often connected to a location where someone died. And the people who tell these stories over and over again are people like my dad. Not flaky people, not people looking for attention, not people who have a history of seeing things. Regular, practical people who have one story and can't let it go because they can't explain it, and they know what they saw. I drove that highway once a few years ago. I was in the area for something else, and I just decided to take the scenic route, the old state road my dad would have been on. It was a fall afternoon, nothing like the late summer night he described, and it's a pretty drive, flat and open. The land doing that thing it does in the Midwest where it goes all the way to the horizon and you can see weather coming from 20 miles away. I found mile marker 41. There's nothing there now. Just a stretch of road, fields on either side, a stand of trees, maybe a quarter-mile back. No monument, no marker, no indication that anything ever happened there. Just road. I pulled over and got out and stood there for a minute. Felt a little silly, honestly. Standing there on the shoulder of a state highway with my hands in my pockets looking at nothing. The wind was moving through the corn and it was making that sound corn makes in the fall when it's dry, that papery rustling. I don't know what I expected to feel or see. Nothing happened. It was just a road. But I thought about my dad at 24, pulling over in his old pickup truck, a young guy just trying to do a decent thing for a stranger on a dark highway, and I thought about whatever Robert was, whether he was something that had once been a person and couldn't quite leave, or whether he was something else entirely that I don't have a framework for, and I thought about my grandmother's words that my dad has quoted to me so many times. You gave him a ride, Gary. That was a good thing. Maybe that's all he needed. I got back in my car and I drove on. Now my dad is in his early 60s. He still lives about 20 minutes from where I grew up. He's retired from the county, spends a lot of time in his garage fixing things that don't need fixing and listening to the radio. He doesn't talk about this story often. Maybe once every few years it'll come up, usually if someone brings up the topic of strange experiences or if we drive past a hitchhiker and someone says something. But when he tells it now, it's exactly the same as it was when he told it to me when I was 12, in the back seat of our car going home from Grandma's. Same exit, same time of night, same description of the man, same cold that came over him a few miles from Millerton, same empty back seat in the rearview mirror. He's never added to it, never dramatized it. In a world where people's memories shift and stories grow and details get colored by time, my dad's story about Robert has stayed exactly the same for 30 years, and I find that more unsettling than any embellishment ever could be. There's one more thing. I almost forgot this part, or maybe I save it because I don't quite know what to do with it. About 5 years ago, my dad and I were driving somewhere together. Just a regular drive, daytime, nothing special, and out of nowhere he said to me, "You know, the thing I've never told anyone is what I felt right before I looked in the mirror, right before I saw the back seat was empty." I looked at him. I said, "What do you mean? What did you feel?" He kept his eyes on the road and he said, "I felt like he leaned forward, like he was about to say something, like he'd finally thought of whatever it was he'd been trying to figure out how to say the whole ride." I asked him what he thought Robert had been about to say. My dad shook his head. "Never found out. That's when the cold hit and I looked up. He didn't say anything else about it and neither did I, and we drove on and talked about other things. But I think about that a lot. The idea that whatever Robert was, wherever he went, he'd been working up to something, had something he needed to say, and he ran out of road before he could say it. Maybe my grandmother was wrong. Maybe the ride wasn't enough. Maybe he's still out there at mile marker 41 on a late summer night, waiting for another set of headlights to come around that curve, still working up to whatever it was he needed to tell somebody. I don't know, man. I really don't know. But I'll tell you one thing. Since my dad told me that story when I was 12 years old, I have never once picked up a hitchhiker. Not once, and I don't think I ever will.